Hi everyone, welcome back to the series. In the last episode, what we did, we created our player input script, which allows us to press our A and D keys to move left and right. We also limit our movement, so we can never leave the bounds of the screen, and if we press the space bar, we shoot. Now in this video, we're going to be focusing on the aliens and their movements in groups. So let's work out how we want our aliens to be moving. If we think of this as our game scene, the red bars are the bounds of the play area and the green dots are just our aliens. So the way that we want this to work is we want to move our aliens from left to right horizontally, and then when we reach the bounds we want to move down, and then we want to switch directions and move back to the left, down, and then back over. But what we also want to make sure is, for example, if we kill all of these enemies, goodbye, we want to make sure that instead of ending where we usually would have, approximately here, and then changing our direction again, we want to make sure that if everything's destroyed, we make our way all the way over to the far end with our new end aliens, and then rinse and repeat. So let's get working on this. So what we're going to need two scripts for this. We're going to need an alien master script, and we're also going to need an individual alien script. So we'll start with the alien master for now. This is probably going to be our most complicated and our largest script in this game. So what we'll do, we'll take it slow and we'll go through it bit by bit. So what are we going to need? First of all, like before, we're going to need a public game object, and that's going to be, again, the bullet prefab, but this time it's going to be the enemy bullet prefab. We're also going to need some private vector 3s. What these are going to hold are our horizontal move distance, and we'll just set that to a new vector 3 and initialize it at 0 for now. We'll work these out in just a minute. And again, we're going to need one for the vertical movement as well. And just like in our player script, we're also going to want to cap the movements on the left and the right. So again, we'll use some constants. Use private const float max left, and we already know that our max left for our screen is minus 2.5. So we can put that in, and again, right will be positive 2.5. Now if we take a look at this example that should be on screen right now, we can see that we don't want smooth movements for our enemies. We want a timer, and whenever that timer's up, we want the enemies to jump to the next position. One thing that the original Space Invaders does as well is the less enemies that are on screen, the quicker that they move. So we can incorporate this very easily into our move method. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to add in two more private variables, and they're going to be private float move timer, and we're going to need a private const float move time. Now we're going to use move time to calculate our actual speed of movement. So the way that we're going to do this, we're going to multiply the amount of enemies left on screen by move time. So we have to set this to something very small, so we'll set this to 0.005. And our move timer is going to be the timer in which our enemies are moving. So if we have, for example, 0.01, that means every 10th of a second, or every 100th of a second rather, we're going to move our player. But what we're going to do, we're going to calculate this inside of our script based on how many enemies we have left. So instead of actually speeding up our enemies, we just speed up the movement speed for our entire enemy block. Now this is all going to make sense very soon when we get into creating our movement method, which is right about now. So we just create a private void move enemies, spell private correctly, And inside here, we're going to want to move every single one of our aliens. So we're going to need a reference to every single one of our aliens. So this time we'll create a public static, because later on in the tutorial we're going to want to check this out in another script. So we'll make this static, and it's going to be a list. Now, to use lists, we're going to be using system.collections.generic. And what are we going to need a list of? Well, we're going to need a list of game objects, and this is going to be all of our aliens, and we'll just set this to a new list of game objects. So with this being static, we're not going to see this in the inspector. So we're going to need to find all of our aliens in code. Now, there's a very easy way to do this. What we can do, inside of our start method, we can do a for each loop, and we want to find all of our aliens. So we'll do for each game object geo in game object dot find game objects with tag, and we'll create this tag in just a second, but we'll find everything that's tagged with alien, and if it is, we want to add it to our all aliens list. So all aliens dot add geo. So now by the time we're playing the game, our list should contain every one, or a reference to every one of our active aliens. So now we can get moving them. The first thing that we're going to want to do, we're going to want to make sure that our aliens count is greater than 0, so we actually have at least one alien inside of the game scene. So if all aliens.count is greater than 0, we'll start moving that block. So we'll create a for loop, and if you don't know what I just did there, if you type in a loop format, for this example for, and press your tab key twice, it will auto-fill the syntax for you. Just a little tip there. So what we're going to want to check is, we're going to create an int I, set it to 0, while I is less than all aliens.count. We'll iterate over each one of those. And inside here, we're going to want to determine whether or not we're moving our aliens to the left or to the right. So we'll go ahead and create another private bool, moving right, and pop back down here. So for every one of our aliens, we're going to want to check if we're moving right. Now, if we are, we're going to get our current instance, or our current object, out of our all aliens list using I as our index, and we're going to set that to transform.position plus equals our h move distance, our horizontal move distance. Or else we're going to do exactly the same, but this time we're going to use minus equals. So we'll increment our x position if we're moving right, and we'll decrement our x position if we're moving to the left. But now we want to make sure that we keep all of our aliens inside our boundary. So inside our first if statement, where we're checking if our count's greater than 0, we'll just create a local variable and we'll call it hitMax. And what this is going to hold is, this is going to hold how many aliens have actually hit one of our boundaries. So after we've moved the current alien, we can check if all aliens, and we'll get again the reference to the current one that we're on, dot transform dot position dot x is greater than our, sorry, that should be greater than our max right, or we are less than our max left. In other words, we've got at least one of our aliens that have touched our boundary. All we're going to want to do for now is increment hitmax by 1, so we'll use hitmax plus plus. So that should take care of the movements. Now we can check that if hit max is actually greater than 0, so we have actually hit our boundary. We'll run over every one of our aliens again, but this time what we're going to do, we're going to move all of them down by a vertical amount as well. So we can just copy our movement, and this time we want to take away our vertical move distance, and we don't need those curly brackets because we only have one line in our for statement. I like to do this. I know a lot of people don't, so do it your way, but whenever I have one line inside an if statement or a for loop, I don't bother with the curly brackets. And then finally, after we've moved all of our aliens down by 1, we want to make sure that we set move, what have I called it? I want to set moving right equal to the opposite of whatever moving right currently is. So if we're moving right, we'll toggle that to moving left, and vice versa. So now that we have our movement script, we can call this inside of our update. Now, like I said before, we're going to only want to call this every so often of a fraction of a second, so we get that jagged old school movement. So how do we go about doing this? Well, we're going to need to check if our move timer is less than or equal to 0. And if it is, we'll call move enemies. If it's not, we'll wait. And at the bottom of our update section, we want to take away time.delta time from our move timer. So what that's going to do, every time update's called, we're going to take a fraction of a second away from our move timer and then loop back round again. And if that fraction of a second takes us beyond 0 seconds, we're then going to move our enemies. So what we're going to want to make sure is we reset this move timer whenever we've finished moving our enemies. But like I said previously, we aren't hard coding our move timer amount. We're going to base this on how many aliens we have left inside of our game. We'll create a new method just for calculating this for us, and it's going to return a float. And we'll just call this get move speed. Now this is going to be very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to create a float f, and we'll set that equal to all aliens.count, so how many are left in our list, and we're going to times this by our move time. And as you remember before, move time is the very small float value. So if we have, for example, 10 enemies left, we'll times this value by 10 and then return it. Return F. Now I did do a little bit of cheating and I've already tested this, and when you have, I think it was 3 or less enemies, it becomes almost impossible to shoot them, they move that fast. So we're going to add in a maximum move speed. We come back up to our variables up at the top, and this again is going to be a constant. So we'll add in a private const float max move speed, and I found that the best way to do this is set this to 0.2. Sorry, 0.02 that is. And now that we have our max move speed, instead of just returning F, what we can do, we can check if F is less than our max move speed, we're just going to return the max move speed, which is 0.02. Or else if it's greater than, so we want it to move slightly slower, we're going to return F like we did before. Perfect, so that's our little calculation method completed. So after we've moved all of our enemies, we're going to set move timer equal to get move speed. So that should work out our varying speeds for us. So what do we need to do now? We need to create our alien group. We're going to need to create the tag alien so our script can find it, and then we can move on to our individual alien scripts. So first of all, just so we don't forget, because I'm a nightmare for forgetting to create tags when I've referenced them in script. So if we jump over to one of our alien prefabs, go under tag add tag, click the plus, and call this alien. Now we can select all 5 of our aliens and give them the alien tag. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy in one of our aliens, create a new empty object, and we'll call this alien parent. And we'll make sure this is centered. And we'll also center our alien, and we'll put alien as a child of alien parent. Now we can go ahead and drag and drop our alien master onto our alien parent, and drag and drop our enemy bullet into the enemy bullet prefab. Now we'll go ahead, we'll duplicate this, and we'll move our alien over. Now I think that's got a little bit too much of a distance, so let's just edit my snap settings really quickly. So on the X, 0.75, 0.75 maybe. I should have probably put that back before I did that. If we just drag him back, 0.75, we move him over. Yeah, there we go, that's right. So we can create a few rows of aliens here. So we're going to create 5 rows. So we'll use all 5 of our different aliens. So I'll speed this up and I'll get back to you once I've created this map. So now, as you can see, all I've gone ahead and done is I've duplicated each one of my aliens 6 times and put it in the standard Space Invaders style grid. Now we can go ahead and get our aliens moving. Now if we select our alien parent, we can move around our entire block all at once. Now what we want to do, we want to work out how far we want to move our aliens to the left and right, and also up and down. And I think a very small number is needed for this. So if we move our position from 0 to 0.05, we can see that we move over just a fraction. I think that's going to be about right. And maybe 0.5, no, that's way too much. 0.05 again. Yeah, 0.05 and 0.05. We can always amend those later if we need to. So inside of our move distance, we'll add in on our Y value, our X value, 0.05 for our horizontal movement, and then on the Y, we want to make sure we add in 0.05 again for our vertical movements. So if we jump back over into Unity and play the game, we should see our aliens moving in a block. And they are. We'll reach the end, and then we'll turn back round, and we start moving to the right, and then back to the left. I do think, however, that vertical movement should be a little bit more. Let's try 0.15. That's much better. Now that we have the movement completed, we can go ahead and get these aliens shooting. So we pop back over into Visual Studio. We're going to treat the shooting very similar to we're treating the movements, wherein we'll have a timer, and when the time is up, one of our aliens will shoot. So we can go ahead, we'll just copy those move timers, and we'll call one shoot timer and shoot time. The shoot time will be a constant again because we don't want to change this. We just want to make sure that we're not hard coding any values into our script. So our shoot time, say 3 seconds, and we'll just default our shoot timer to 3 seconds as well. So what this is going to do, every 3 seconds, one of our aliens is going to shoot one of the bullet prefabs. We can jump back into our update method, and we can do something very similar to what we've just done. We can do if shoot timer is less than or equal to 0, we'll call a method that we're going to call shoot. And just like before, at the end of the update, we're going to minus time.delta time away from our shoot timer. So let's go and create this shoot method. We'll collapse down enemy movement for now, and we'll create a private void shoot. So the first thing we're going to want to do, we're going to make sure that we instantiate our bullet prefab. But where do we want to put that? We're going to need to find a valid position for our bullet to actually fire from. So we can create a vector2, call it pos for position, and what we'll do, we'll get all aliens, we'll pick a random alien from inside that list. We can use random.range 0 to all aliens dot count, and we'll get that random aliens transform dot position. So now we can guarantee that the position that we spawn the bullet in is actually a valid position because we've found it based on one of the aliens still inside of our game. So we can then instantiate our bullet prefab at the position that we've selected, and again we'll use quaternion.identity. And just like at the end of our move enemies method, we want to make sure that we set shoot timer equal to shoot time. So that will reset our timer back to 3 seconds. So just like that, we should be able to play the game, and then every 3 seconds a bullet will appear. But we haven't actually connected any movement scripts to the enemy bullets yet, so they'll probably just float about. There we have it. We have one bullet right there, we have another one that spawned over here, so we can see that that's working. So we can quickly go in and we'll create a new script called enemy bullet. Open this up in Visual Studio, and this is going to look very similar to our friendly bullet script, wherein we're going to need the collision enter, we're going to need the update. We'll throw these in, but this time we're going to want to move downwards, because obviously the enemies are shooting from above, we want that to move down. And again, we want that same speed. Ignore that plus. Ignore me pressing all the keys. I have very fat fingers. So if we just jump back, find our enemy bullet prefab, and we can drag and drop enemy bullet in. So now if we play the game, every time an enemy shoots, we should see that the bullet comes down. And there it is. And just to make sure that it doesn't persist throughout the entire game, we'll add our destroy after seconds utility script. If it'll let me drag and drop it, why are you not letting me drop it? Come on, there it is. And we'll destroy this after 2 seconds. Now the final enemy that we want is our mothership, and again we can still control our mothership spawning using our alien master script. Now to do this we're going to need one more public prefab. That's going to be public game object, and that's going to be our mothership prefab. We're going to want a new vector3, and that's going to be our mothership spawn position. So we'll just initialize that for now, and we're going to need a few more timers. So again, we're going to do this in exactly the same way. We're going to create a timer. When the timer's up, a mothership is going to spawn at the top of the screen. So we'll create a private float mothership timer. We'll set that to 1 minute, 60 seconds. We need a private const float, and that's going to be our mothership min time. I'll explain this in just a second. And we're going to need another private const float mothership max time, which will be 60. These need to be floats. So the reason I'm using a min and max, I don't want my mothership to be spawning every 60 seconds. I want it to spawn at a random time between every 15 and 60 seconds. So let's jump back down. We'll close off our shooting script. Shooting method rather. We'll create one more public void, and we'll call this spawn mothership. And all we're going to want to do when this is called, we want to instantiate the who's beeping? Should be a lockdown, this. We want to instantiate the prefab at our mothership prefab position, and again we want quaternion.identity. And just like before, we want to make sure that we reset our mothership timer. This time we're going to set it to a random dot range between our mothership minimum and mothership maximum. So that way it's not so obvious when one's going to be spawning. So one more inside of our update. We'll do exactly the same. We'll check if our mothership timer is less than or equal to 0, and we'll spawn a mothership. And then again, just like before, mothership timer is minus equal to time dot delta time. So before we test this out, what we're going to want to do, we're going to want to make sure that we have a mothership script so it's not spawning off screen like we've been doing previously. So really quickly, create another script, call this mothership. So inside our mothership script, if you remember from the original game, what this is a little spaceship that appears right at the very top of the screen every now and again, and if you manage to shoot it, you get a very high amount of score, but it does move very quickly. So what are we going to need in here? Well, we don't actually need a start method inside here. We're going to need a public int, and this is going to be our score value. We're also going to need a private const float, which is going to be our max left value. So again, we'll just set this to 0 for now. And another private float speed. And we'll set this to 5. I think that's going to be okay, relatively quick. So inside of our update method, same as we've done with all of our other objects, we will do transform.translate. Going to move vector2.left because we're going to be spawning in on our right hand side of the screen, times time.delta time times our speed. And then we'll just make sure that if our position, so transform.position.x, if we are less than or equal to our max left, we'll destroy the game object. As simple as that. And again, later on, we're going to need our on-collision enter 2D to detect if a player has shot it down. So let's quickly just work out what our max left should be. We can grab one of these just for now. We'll move it outside of the view of the camera. We'll use -5, I think. We throw in -5 there. And then quickly, just like before, we'll go and set up our mothership by dragging and dropping the mothership onto the prefab. And we'll just give it a score value of 500 for now. That's not going to come into play until later on. One final thing we need to do, we need to attach our mothership prefab to our alien parent. And just so we can see this working very quickly, what we'll do, instead of having our original timer set to 60 seconds, we'll just set this to 1 second. We almost forgot to set our spawn position. So again, let's just grab one of our guys here. We'll move him above and to the right outside of the camera's view. So we can use these values here as our spawn values. So we can bring that in. And we can also bring in our Y value, because this is always going to spawn in at the same height regardless of where our other aliens are. We'll put him back. Now we should be able to play the game, and in 1 second we should see our mothership speed across the screen, and there it goes. And I think that just about wraps it up for this tutorial. On the next one, we're going to be taking a look at adding collisions so our bullets actually disappear. We're going to be getting rid of our enemies, and we'll also get rid of the mothership as well whenever we shoot it. And we may also do a few little tweaks, some aesthetic tweaks, just to get our game looking a little bit nicer. So I hope you're learning something in this series by now, and I hope to see you again in the next video.